Hello guys, this is Trinity Storm here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a short movie on what if Naruto gained Ring of Power. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The folly of humanity is that we as a species truly believe that we understand how the universe works, despite the fact that we have no idea and delude ourselves into thinking that we know enough. As was the case when the Tower of Sauron fell after the One Ring was destroyed in Mount Doom's lava. Everyone, from the Uruk to the Ring Wraiths, assumed that when the tower fell and his armies vanished with it, the rings that corrupted various men into the wraiths that they had become were destroyed as well. And, for the most part, they were correct, but they never sent anyone out to find and confirm this, so how would they know if they were still alive or not? All of the rings of power that gave the wraiths their power broke that day when the one who ruled over them all was destroyed, but one ring of power remained. Because its purpose had not yet been fulfilled, the ring of power that the great King Isildur once wore before the ranger known as Talion took it for himself was transported out of the realm of Middle-earth to what would become the desolate ruins of Whirlpool, the fallen home of the once great clan of the Uzumaki. At a later date, the day matched the mood of the moment because it was dark and raining heavily, but the weather wasn't a big surprise because it had been raining for weeks on end as if the gods were warning the people who had to suffer through it that their end was near. But, because the people caught in the rain were among the most stubborn and arrogant in the land, the warning went unheeded, and they believed they could survive it as they had done so many other horrible things that had threatened their village, such as 3 separate shinobi wars. A lone figure stood on a hill far from his destination, but his glowing golden eyes allowed him to see what he wanted to see. The man was dressed in a dark cloak that helped him blend into the background so no one could see him in the darkness of night. The fact that the moon was obscured by clouds only added to the figure's concealment. The man then used his enhanced tracking abilities to spot several squads of shinobi patrolling in the area and moved in to kill them all. One squad after another was easily dispatched by this lone figure's blade, but that wasn't the end of them because he then used his powers to force them to rise up and obey his commands. He told them to spread out and remain hidden until he called them. Within a few hours, all shinobi patrolling the land outside of the village were dead and under his command. The figure then climbed a tree and surveyed the area until he found what he needed. He needed to open the village's front gate, but he needed a target to get onto the wall without being seen out in the open by scouts. It took some time, but he eventually found a target, so he summoned his trusty bow and drew back an arrow made of red energy before releasing it. It pierced the target's neck, but the arrow vanished, and in its place was a figure with a blade stabbing through it. The figure then proceeded to behead his target. The downside was that he wouldn't be able to command the target again, but that was the price for getting on the wall. The figure's eyes glowed as he surveyed the area and noticed the few guards guarding the gate to the outside, as the majority of those on guard were now dead in the forest, waiting for him to give the signal. He dispatched them as quickly as he dispatched those who had fallen to his blade outside the wall, and they, like those he had killed before, were now his to command. So he directed them to help him open the gate, and once it was open, he directed all those under his command to join him. The figure's rage erupted in such a massive wave of power that everyone in the village felt it, and just as the figure had wished, the forces of the village arrived and surrounded the area. Seeing all of them there only fueled his rage, as he saw people he had truly believed to be his friends at one point in his life, and yet here they stood, ready to kill him again, just like they had a month before. The figure then made a fist with his ring hand in front of him, summoning all the power he could muster, and out of the ring came a pulse of power that summoned forth the army of spirits that were his to command. And not just any spirits. These were the spirits of the forgotten Uzumaki clan, whom the figure had summoned for assistance in his quest for vengeance, and they eagerly responded. And with a wave of his hand, his army rushed forward to slaughter all who stood in their way under their master's command. Because Naruto Uzumaki's orders were absolute. About a month ago. In some cases, an end is simply a new beginning. This is the case with the current Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, 9-tailed fox, as his mother and grandmother were before him. He was the son of Kushina Uzumaki and her husband, the Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze. Orphaned during the Nine Tails attack on Konohagakure no Sado, Naruto was treated as the village pariah, with most of the village seeing him as the reincarnation of the Nine Tails, rather than the village hero, as his late father had requested in his final wishes to Jiraiya and Hiruzen Sarutobi. Instead, despite being denied nearly everything he was entitled to, Naruto set his sights on becoming Hokage and enrolled in the Konohagakure Shinobi Academy to prove himself, with the support of Hiruzen Sarutobi. After graduating with his classmates at the age of 12, he was assigned to Cell 7, which included Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha, as well as Kakashi Hatake as their sensei. Naruto would leave an impression wherever he went prior to the Chunin exams and the death of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Most Konoha citizens and shinobi forces would go on to say that the Uchiha were responsible for their trading and military alliances, but history is sometimes written by those who slander their heroes. Konohagakure and Fire Country had numerous trading and military alliances with Spring, formerly Snow Country, Wave Country, Tea Country, Sea Country, and countless others because of Naruto. Despite this, Naruto was repeatedly denied advancement because of the villagers' bigotry. He was denied the rank of Chunin despite his role in stopping Gaara's rampage during the Tsunaoto invasion of Konoha and bringing back Tsunade Senju to become the Godem Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado. It is well understood that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts completely. This is the case with Sasuke Uchiha. He was approached during the Chunin exams by Orochimaru, who had placed the cursed seal of heaven upon his body, granting the Uchiha a sample of immense power. Sasuke defected from the village, seduced by the opportunity to gain more power under the Snake Sage in order to avenge his clan. On Tsunade's orders, a genin team led by newly minted Chunin Shikamaru Nara was formed, consisting of Choji Akamichi, Neji Hyuga, Rock Lee, Kiba Inuzuka, and Naruto Uzumaki, to retrieve the rogue Uchiha. The Uchiha retrieval mission was underway, aided by Suna's Sand siblings, Gaara, Kankuro, and Temari. While the rest of Team Shikamaru was fighting the Sound 4, Uzumaki was fighting the Uchiha. Despite the use of the cursed seal in the Chidori, Sasuke had succumbed to the greater will of his former teammate, as well as the power of the Nine Tails wielded by Naruto. The Uchiha retrieval mission was a success, with Team Shikamaru suffering numerous injuries and Uzumaki himself suffering not one, but 2 Chidoris in the chest and shoulder. Sasuke Uchiha was returned to Konoha. Naruto had hoped that now that the Uchiha was safely back in the village and the retrieval mission had been successful, he would receive the recognition he deserved from both civilians and shinobi. He was completely wrong. Despite everything going well in the mission, he was to be banished, with the full support of Jiraiya, who was after his father's jutsu and seals that were in the Namikaze estates that were Naruto's birthright, and Tsunade Senju, who had been stealing money from the Uzumaki accounts to pay off her outrageous gambling debts for years, but since Naruto was nearing the age of 13 she would have been cut off since it was Tsunade and Jiraiya were clearly not as fond of the Uchiha as the rest of the village, but they despised Naruto even more, and their greed clouded their judgment. People had always assumed that Naruto was a moron or at least dumber than he appeared, but no one knew that he had always known who his father was. How could people not notice it, when no one else in his village had both blonde hair and blue eyes? Sure, there was Ino, but she had a father who was well known. When he had his first conversation with the demon inside him when he was 6, and a mob had attacked him and left him for dead yet again, the Kyuubi confirmed this and began to train him in secret. Nonetheless, with so many eyes on him, his training was slow. And it once again demonstrated that man's arrogance only allows us to see what we want to see, because even though they thought Naruto was the weak, simple-minded shinobi they wanted him to be, he was still able to accomplish more than those who had been trained far better than he had been in his life. Even so, no one had ever connected the dots and completed the picture. With this training, he was able to learn about the plan to exile him and kill him at the hands of the root Anbu, in order to weaken the seals surrounding the Namikaze compound, allowing Jiraiya to break through and rob Konoha of the combined wealth and jutsu of the Uzumaki Namikaze clan. Naruto, who had overheard the conspirators while disguised as a member of the Anbu Black Ops outside the Hokage's office because he had a gut feeling to do so and hear what he had thought as his friends and loved ones say behind his back, was enraged by this betrayal by those he considered to be his closest friends and loved ones, as well as the callousness of the village and the fire daimyo. That day, his dream of becoming Hokage died. So he went quietly to the estate itself, packed everything he should have inherited years ago, and planned to leave immediately without giving those plotting his death a chance to do so, but before he left, he needed to see the one person in the village he thought he could trust. Hinata, like the rest of the village, believed that he was too stupid to understand her feelings for him. So he made his way to the Hyuga clan's residence, but not before concealing the large scroll containing his inheritance, just in case, because he was not one to take chances. When he arrived, he was met with little resistance by members of the branch family and allowed into a private room to see Hinata herself. He should have known something was wrong because the Hyuga had never been so kind to him, but his curiosity drove him forward. When he met her, they talked, and she blushed at what he said and fought the fainting episodes that she was prone to, but when he told her about his impending banishment, she was distraught. He explained that he had come to see her to satisfy his curiosity about her because he had always noticed her stalking him or blushing when she was near him. She apologized for appearing to be a stalker and got up to offer him a drink before he left. As soon as he finished the tea she had brought, she was a completely different person, laughing manically about fooling the dumbass of an Uzumaki. The drugs she had hidden in the tea kicked in, and his body collapsed. Hinata directed a few branch members to take him to the special room that had been prepared for him, and they did so without hesitation. And yet, like so many other things they misjudged about him, they seriously underestimated his ability to counteract drugs in his system, despite the fact that various people had been drugging him for years as they harmed him. The most common of them were Ayame and her father, who he knew were doing it, but with the help of the Kyuubi nullifying the effects, it was free food, and he was not one to turn down free food in his lifetime. So he ate everything they gave him, all while increasing his tolerance to various types and strengths of drugs. He was strapped to the bed once he arrived in the room set up for him, and Hinata arrived with a few other Hyuga women in tow. She began to monologue their evil plan for him, as so many cliché copyright villains in stories do. The plan was to force him to impregnate a few women, after which the children would be enslaved in such a way that even the branch family would appear tame in comparison. She went on to describe how the Hyuga were always envious of the Uzumaki for their physical as well as political power in the world, and how her mother would curse the name Kushina Uzumaki to her dying day for surviving the massacre of her clan. That her mother was supposed to marry Minato, but that redhead freak had gotten to him first, and she would never forgive her even if she died. So the plan to degrade one of the most powerful clans ever to exist into nothing more than slaves to the Hyuga clan began, because her mother and father had been the driving force behind erasing the Uzumaki clan's history from the records so they would be forgotten began. Their sick plan was to create a branch family within the Brach family, which disgusted Naruto to no end. Naruto, who had purged all the drugs from his system and was only pretending to be high to hear what she had to say, had broken free from his bonds and attacked Hinata head-on. She had always been a woman many men desired because of her beauty, but Naruto changed that by clawing her face while using the Kyuubi's energy to ensure the damage was permanent and that no healing jutsu would ever help her again. One of her eyes was permanently damaged, and half of her face was burned beyond recognition. And with that, he quickly escaped the Hyuga compound because they were still in shock that he had gotten free in the first place and didn't react quickly enough to stop him. He quickly recovered his scroll and ran for the nearest gate out of the village, but he didn't get very far before he was pursued by his former friends, who were under orders to kill him because they knew the truth behind his seal, that if he died, the Kyuubi would die as well, with no chance of reforming. He was able to fight them off with the help of the Kyuubi's training, but it was the memories he had of each of them as children that prevented him from delivering the killing blow, and they took advantage of that weakness. Tsunade's assistant Shizune got a clear line of sight against him and fired several senbon into his back from her launcher while he was distracted by them. After she succeeded, the pursuing party retreated from the battlefield and left him alone, but not before taking his scroll that he had written down to help him fight better back to the village, leaving him perplexed as to why they were retreating. But what they didn't realize was that he had a special hidden seal made in case his possessions were ever stolen. It contained a large explosive payload as well as his inheritance, so if anyone other than him tried to open it or break the seal without his blood as well as the Kyuubi's energy, it would activate and blast everyone in the immediate area as well as the building itself. The Kyuubi then delivered the worst news of his now short life. The senbon he'd been hit with were laced with a poison designed specifically to counteract his healing abilities, so there was no way to get rid of it. The poison, from what he could tell, was meant to kill him slowly over the course of the next day, but because he had such a high tolerance to poisons, it would take a few days to fully kill him. So, knowing that there was no medic alive who could heal him, he made the decision to spend his last few days with those he loved. So he rushed to Wave Country to see his old friend Tazuna and his family. To say they were surprised to see him would be an understatement, and at first they assumed he was on some kind of mission for Konoha, but he quickly dispelled that notion by telling them everything. And he held nothing back from his past, from the daily attacks on him by mobs of villagers, from the fact that those he thought were friends betrayed him without hesitation, and from the fact that he was the Kyuubi's container. He told them about the poison that was now coursing through his body and would kill him in a matter of days. Inari cried as he was told this and asked if anyone could heal him, but Naruto told him that there was no one who could because time and effort had gone into making it so that he wouldn't be able to heal from it. He packed his belongings and began to leave the house for the last time in his life, but not before making Inari promise to strengthen himself so that he would never have to suffer as he had, which Inari tearfully promised he would. So, when asked where he would spend his final days, he simply replied, "Home," before packing his belongings and leaving with only the clothes on his back. As a parting gift from the people of Wave, who were saddened by the news that their hero was going to die, he took a boat from the docks. People spread the word about what Konoha had done to Naruto as soon as he left on his one-way trip to his destination, and as a result, their end was drawing near and they had no idea about it. Whirlpool. When Naruto was first told about his parents by the Kyuubi, he came across a book that detailed the history of Whirlpool in its prime. It was part of a group of books that were being destroyed in order to erase all traces of the Uzumaki ever existing in the first place. But when Naruto discovered it while diving through the trash, he made it a personal goal of his to reach the lands of his ancestors, which he did, albeit at the end of his life. As he stepped off the boat, he made his way deeper into the ruins of Whirlpool, feeling his body weaken as he coughed up blood and his heart begin to slow. As he walked, tears began to fall from his eyes because he didn't believe this was fair, that after all he had gone through, he should die like this. Every step he took, he felt his heart begin to slow down gradually, and it was so quiet around him that he could clearly hear his heartbeat. He heard a quiet whisper calling to him as his death approached, and he followed it all the way to a door at the base of a dark wood tree that had survived the attack on the village. But, from what he could see, there was no way in because the door was sealed tight, but as he tried to open it with what little strength he had left, the necklace he had won in a bet from Tsunade began to glow and slammed against the door like a magnet. The necklace melted into the door and it opened up to him, and as it did, the whisper became louder, and he followed it into a room filled with scrolls that once belonged to his ancestors, as well as huge mountains of gold and various gems. Many people were unaware that the necklace was a set of 3, with each serving as a key to the door. While one was always with the Uzumaki clan head and was destroyed in the massacre, another was hidden away and lost to time, and the third was given to a senju many generations ago with no knowledge of what he truly held in his hands and returned to its rightful owner over time. But Naruto paid no attention to them because he didn't need them. He followed the whisper until he came across a box with no lock, and when he opened it, he discovered a ring inside that glowed with power. Naruto took the ring from the box after hearing a whisper tell him to wear it and seek vengeance on those who had sought his death. But before he could, he was surrounded by 24 root shinobi under orders to deliver him to Danzo so that his seed could be used to breed a new container for the other Biju that he planned to capture in the future to make more weapons for his quest to conquer the world. Naruto heard their demands for his immediate surrender, but he didn't care because he wanted to die on his own terms and refused to be a pawn to a power-hungry man in death. So he put on the ring of power without hesitation, and as soon as he put it on his finger, a surge of power coursed through him, causing the root nin to flee the immediate area to plan accordingly, and to their surprise, a powerful figure walked out of the vault towards them. He was dressed in a dark cloak with strange armor that no one knew where it came from and 2 swords strapped to his back. The figure raised his hand, and the door closed behind him as the necklace that had opened it flew into his hand, which he used to tuck into a pocket on the inside of his cloak. To the nin's surprise, the figure looked up, and it was Naruto, with demonically golden eyes staring deep into their souls. A few of them charged forward to attack him, but because the ring had increased his speed, he easily countered their attacks. The last one to swing at him, he not only blocked with his sword, but quickly parried it and moved behind him before stabbing the nin through the back of the head all the way to the front. He then applied enough force to decapitate him. The other nin then attacked him, but Naruto easily countered all of their attacks flawlessly as well as one by one with various lethal strikes until he had enough power to slam the ground and freeze those who remained before shattering them with his spiritual hammer that he possessed. The few survivors attempted to flee, but Naruto quickly dispatched them by summoning his bow and killing them in a series of shadow kills. He felt the power flow through him as the last one died by his hands, but he knew in the back of his mind that this gift of power was only temporary, so that he could at least exact his revenge on those who had wronged him. When he looked around, he saw the spirits of his clan rise from the ground and hail him as their avenger, and they all became absorbed into his body to be summoned when the time was right. Naruto realized he needed to get to work. His first step was to station his clan's spirits throughout Fire Country at strategic points to kill any samurai or shinobi who attempted to leave for any reason. No one could explain what killed them because there were no visible wounds on their bodies, nor were there any notable medical problems to note because spirits attack the soul of the person rather than the body. Naruto set his sights on liberating his fellow Jinchuriki from the clutches of those who would abuse their power once the borders were secure. And, one by one, he persuaded them to join him, much to the chagrin of their respective villages. They were offered shelter in the ruins of Whirlpool because that would be the last place any village would look, and with the combined might of all Jinchuriki, except for Gaara, who was Kazekage at the time, and Yagura, who was dead at the time, they would be able to defend their new home against all intruders. When they offered to join him in his quest, he declined because they had earned a better life away from those who would only seek to control them. So, now that they were happier and out of the way, he was ready for the next step. His second step was to simply locate and assassinate Orochimaru, who was easy to locate with his new set of abilities. Naruto didn't waste time devising a strategy for Orochimaru because he was likely prepared for a variety of scenarios, but he would never expect a direct attack on his base of operations. So, without warning, the village was attacked, and all who had fallen to Naruto's blade rose up and fought for him. Their superior numbers soon became their undoing, as Naruto was quick to kill anyone who stood in his way. Soon after, Orochimaru and Kabuto emerged from hiding to deal with him personally, with Kabuto striking first. Naruto had previously struggled to fight him, but with his newfound power and skills, Naruto was easily able to counter everything Kabuto threw at him and eventually ended the fight with a quick decapitation from behind with his spirit making the killing blow on him. Orochimaru attempted to flee with his life after witnessing his right-hand man being easily killed by this intruder. Naruto was too quick for him, grabbing his head and pulsing his energy through it. He was able to disconnect his spirit from everything he had placed the curse seal on throughout his lifetime by doing so before his head exploded in such a gory fashion. Many people in the elemental countries dropped to their knees and screamed in agony as they felt the curse literally burn from their bodies, but they felt truly cleansed afterwards. With the threat to the world's innocence removed, it was time to face his final challenge, the Akatsuki. Over the next week, he tracked down their members as they traveled in pairs and easily defeated them, because despite being classified as S-rank shinobi in their respective villages, none of them had ever faced someone like them. It wasn't until the final 3 members, Pain, Konan, and Tobi, were left that Naruto took the time to at least try to talk to his opponents before killing them. He informed Pain that he was aware of his true name, Nagato Uzumaki, and that they belonged to the same clan. He attempted to persuade him that his plan was flawed and that he should abandon it in favor of a brighter future. However, his mind was too far gone at this point due to his arrogant god complex, and Naruto had no choice but to end his life along with the others. The Akatsuki had been declared dead. During the raid on Orochimaru's base, he met one person who he spared while the others were killed because they either willingly served the snake or were too weak from the horrible experiments done to them, so it was an act of mercy killing. Naruto gave Karen Uzumaki the necklace, key to her inheritance, and told her to return to her ancestral home. She did so, and in the months that followed, she learned her ancestors' secrets and unsealed the Biju from their vessels in such a way that they would not die from them, as well as making a way for them to disappear from the world of man into their own realm, where they could live their own lives without fear of being sealed up again in the future. She would later marry Naruto's friend Gaara, forming a sort of alliance with him that granted Suna the wealth of the Uzumaki, which she would use to help strengthen their shinobi as well as their village.
Naruto had seen her leave as he handed her the necklace, and cried only one tear as she faded into the distance, because she would have the life that was taken from him the moment he took his first breath, but he wiped it away and prepared himself for the final confrontation, because he felt that his power was fading and that he only had a little more time to finish what he started.
During this time, Konoha experienced a significant change from which they would never recover. When the team sent to kill Naruto returned safely, the village called a meeting that included all of the rookies, clan heads, and the civilian council. They were there to discuss how Naruto's belongings would be divided amongst themselves, with the rookies receiving a reward for killing the brat slowly by poison. Jiraiya was fiddling with the seal to get it open so they could take what was sealed inside while they were discussing this, and he was eventually successful. When he broke the seal, not only did he die, but so did everyone else in the room, as the explosion from the forced entry killed everyone. Only one man survived, and it was Danzo because he used his grafted arm to avoid death at the cost of only one of his arm's eyes. He decided to make lemonade out of these lemons and then took control of the village and established a tyrannical rule over it. Root was officially resurrected, and the majority of the village's forces were drafted into it. And it wasn't long after he took control that letters began to arrive from all over the world, stating that they were terminating their alliances and trading agreements with the village because of what they had done to Naruto. Danzo took offense and sent his nin to persuade them to change their minds, but with the spirits of the Uzumaki guarding the border, they were never able to complete their mission. After completing all of his tasks outside of the Fire Country, Naruto summoned his spiritual army and destroyed the Fire Capital. Only the lowest in the hierarchy were spared, with the exception of the Fire Daimyo, who was forced to watch his home burn to the ground before fleeing to Konoha to warn them of the man who had an army capable of killing them all. When asked who this man was, the daimyo fainted in fear after only whispering one word: Rangara. Since then, there have been strict patrols of the area at all times, and the shinobi's training has been doubled, if not tripled, to help prepare them for the approaching storm. And yet, in the end, it wouldn't matter because Naruto would slay everyone who stood in his way. At this moment, the battle was fierce and one-sided because Naruto was using every ounce of his power not only to kill every last person in the village, but also to send out a constant aura from his ring that engulfed the entire village so that even if he wasn't the one who killed the shinobi in another part of the village, they would still rise up to help him. And he didn't stop with the shinobi. He slaughtered the citizens as well, right down to the last child. He directed a few of his spirits to kill the citizens who were holed up in the Hokage monument shelter, and they obeyed by opening the door and torching the only way out. Because none of the civilians inside had chakra, they were unable to use water jutsu to put it out and were burned to death, screaming in agony as they perished. The Fire Daimyo awoke from his 2-day-long fainting spell, and when he looked out the window of his penthouse room, which he had whenever he visited the village for more than a day, he saw the village being attacked and people being slaughtered by the very same forces that had killed his men, and in the same graphic way, with the dead being revived to fight alongside them. When the Fire Daimyo saw this, his heart stopped beating. He collapsed from a heart attack, which was a good thing because spirits had come to kill him right outside his door. Danzo sent his men to die as he retreated back to what he thought was safety, but it wasn't because he was surrounded. His own root forces, now under Naruto's command after being killed and resurrected, surrounded him and took his arms. Danzo screamed in agony as he tried to break free, but it was all in vain. They severed both his regular and normal arms and let him fall forward as he began to bleed. He would have used his abilities to undo the damage at the expense of the last Sharingan in his head, but he was never given the chance because Naruto rushed in from behind and hit him in the back with a blast of icy magic that froze him in place, preventing him from doing what he planned. When Naruto entered his field of vision, his eyes widened in shock and horror. The last thing he saw was Naruto summoning a hammer and smashing him into hundreds of pieces, with no way to recover from the damage. Everyone in the village had died by this point, and Naruto knew his time was running out, so he climbed the Hokage monument and gazed down on the dead village. He laughed as he used the last of his energy to unleash the Kyuubi in the flesh to have the honor of destroying the village as a whole, and he turned the village into a crater with no indication that anyone had lived there. The Kyuubi howled into the night sky before vanishing as his body withered and died. Naruto's heart stopped beating as he stood there admiring the destruction of such human filth, causing him to die. However, it was not as horrifying as he had anticipated, nor were the fiery depths of hell waiting for him. He was in a grassy field, and in the distance he could see Uzushiogakure in its prime. As he began to walk towards it, he noticed his clan members whose spirits had helped him run past him. He unhooked and ripped off his wraith armor before it vanished in a wisp of miasma, leaving him looking like he did before he was poisoned with his orange jumpsuit, back when his life was the happiest when he wasn't aware of the truth. He removed the kunai pouch from his hip and dropped it as he walked, as he no longer needed it in death, before looking ahead, smiling, and walking towards the village. A beautiful woman with red hair and purple eyes stood next to a man with spiky blonde hair and no whiskers on his somewhat narrower face, both smiling and waving to him as they walked towards each other, and when they met, they embraced each other on a loving hug before they walked together to spend the rest of eternity in happiness. Meanwhile, Karen had felt a pain in her heart as Naruto left the realm of the living, but it was quickly replaced by happiness knowing that he was happy and in heave with the rest of the clan, whom she would meet herself in the future once she died. She went to the crater that was once Konoha, but no matter how hard she looked, she couldn't find Naruto's body to bury in Whirlpool. Instead, she discovered a ring that she heard whisper to her, and she kept it with her to return to the vault in Whirlpool because she knew its power would be required again in the future. Epilogue. The world was finally at peace, but it had taken a long time and a lot of bloodshed to get there. When Naruto died, all of his Jinchuriki brethren felt him as he passed and mourned his loss, none more than Gaara, his best friend. He found the others and offered them safety and sanctuary within his village, which they accepted, but with them came Karen, who had discovered a letter left for Gaara by Naruto before he set out on his revenge quest because he knew Karen would find it. He read it, and tears streamed down his cheeks because he had written that he hoped Gaara could live the life he had wished for, and that he loved the man as a sibling. He went on to say that he should contact both Spring and Wave Country because they had previously been friendly with him and, with him vouching for him in the letter, they would aid him in making Suna stronger. Gaara followed his advice, and Suna became the strongest of the shinobi villages within a year. It also took that long for the spies of the other villages to learn that their missing Jinchuriki had arrived. They knew that a full mounted assault would result in their destruction because Gaara was king in the desert, so they devised a devious plan to attack and take not only what they deemed theirs, but everything Suna had to offer as well. Because it was not originally designed by Shizune, they sent an assassin to kill Gaara with a blade tipped in the same poison that killed Naruto. The assassin was about to kill his target when he was stopped by Kankuro, who took the blow meant for Gaara and died shortly after killing the assassin because the poison was meant to kill someone with a biju sealed within them because they healed from wounds others didn't heal from so quickly. Gaara and his sister Temari were devastated by what had occurred, and they made plans to wage war on those responsible. Their adversaries learned of their failure and attempted to kill him once more in order to level the playing field. So they waited until Gaara and his sister, along with the rest of the village, were outside the village's walls to bury Kankuro, and as they lowered his body into the grave, the enemy's most skilled archer prepared an arrow with the deadly poison. And he would have succeeded if Temari hadn't used a wind jutsu to push the sand into the grave to bury her brother's body, changing the trajectory of the arrow and making her the victim of its poison instead of Gaara. Gaara saw this and lost his mind because the enemy had tried to kill him while he was burying his family and killing what little family he had left. In his rage, he used every ounce of his strength to bury the entire army that had come to attack Suna upon his death, and he didn't stop there because the army then stormed both of their villages and slaughtered those within. Even after there were no more enemies to fight, he continued to lash out at anyone who came near him, because the death of his family had been too much for him to bear. He finally stopped and cried into Karen's shoulders when she rushed forward and hugged him with all the affection she could muster. Over the course of the next few months, a romantic relationship would bloom out of this and they would marry and have 2 children in the future, a boy named Kankuro as well as a girl named Temari. Since Gaara was now the last of the Sabaku family, he enacted the CRA and took a second wife in the spring daimyo Koyuki, who they had a son named Naruto in honor of their friend, whose sacrifice had led the world into an era of peace. And Gaara was not sad, for he knew that in the future when it was his time, they would meet again, and the stories they would tell.
That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.